All right. So mail to surveys and integrated special activity RSVPs is what we're here to talk about today. We rolled this out at the conference, and I want to start by doing a high-level overview of the mail to dashboard and how you interact with surveys here in the dashboard, the couple of types that we have, how you use templates for them, the different types of questions that we have, some of the survey setup features that you can access, and then we'll take a look at the test-to integration piece and just show you exactly how that works. So in the Mail2 dashboard, once we have surveys activated for Mail2 for you, there will be a menu item called Surveys. And underneath that, you'll have a couple of different options. You'll have your View, Create, and Templates. Surveys, if we just look at a draft that I have set up here, I've got my post-show survey that's already been created here as a sample. Every survey has an internal name. You can assign a set of questions to that survey. You can have multiple pages with multiple questions on each page, or you can have one question on each page. You can have a single page with a lot of questions on that page itself. And I believe Paula has just joined us. Hello, Paula.
Hi. Sorry, I totally forgot, but I'm here now, so sorry about that.
We're happy to have you. Everybody, Paula Muncaster-Walker with Stratford Shakespeare Festival, and we've got the arena stage here with us as well, who's kind of sharing our call today to look at this feature. So
awesome.
So, Paul, you haven't missed much. We just started looking at how you create surveys in the Mail2 dashboard. So I just started talking about some of the features there. So, so with the questions that you create on the survey, if you use something like SurveyMonkey today, this is going to look really familiar. I mean, the structure of how you build a survey is sort of a pretty commonly understood thing, and we do just that. So you can have multiple pages, multiple questions on each page, et cetera, how you want to set that up. There are a lot of different types of questions that you can create with Mail2, and you'll see a sampling of those here. I'm going to flip over to page 2 so you can see kind of what some of the rest of those are. So we've got like a matrix option here for more complex questions, percentage of time, so you can do like a sum type question, all the values have to add up to a particular number that you indicate, and that's validated, ranking particular options, and so on. All of that is something that you can do with Mail2. We've got your standard single field entry type of question here. You can mark questions as required with a little red star and so on. If we edit a question here, just take a look at what that offers. This single line text question, you have a field here where you put in the text for the question. The question token, which is important when it comes to some of the other features around Mail2 surveys, like if you want to have it send the user a confirmation email after they've completed the survey, you can actually drop the questions and responses into that email so that it emails them all of that information in the follow-up email that it sends. You can also have Mail2 deploy an email to a particular individual on your staff every time a survey is created, and you can put the responses to the questions into that email that's deployed back to your staff member. So that token is a really special and important thing. It's good to have it in there because it opens up some options for you down the road. So that's where you're setting up your questions. You can also mark them as required like we talked about earlier. Within the survey, you can have advanced branching and logic. So we have this logic and actions tab here. This gives you the ability to say something along the lines of, okay, when somebody answers yes to question 1, we want to send them to question 4. If they answer no to question 1, send them to question 2. So you can put this kind of advanced branching into the survey so that you route people to different questions based on their responses so that they don't see questions that aren't relevant to them based on their previous responses, but it gives you the ability to dig down and do a little bit more interesting sort of exploration with people who maybe answer a particular question in a certain way. You also have the ability to, when somebody matches a particular condition on a question, deploy an email to a particular person on your staff. So let's say that you have a question that you know is specific to the concessions team at your organization. And when somebody responds with a very negative response to that, based on how you're quantifying that, you want it to email your concessions manager immediately. Then you can have Mail2 do that. And that's what happens here with the logic and actions section. So some really interesting and exciting things that you can do with that in terms of keeping your team informed and also keeping that dialogue going with patrons, because certainly surveys are a great way to open up dialogues with patrons about certain things with your institution. So that's the question options. Moving on to access controls. I think we got the arena stage folks back here.
Yeah, we just got back.
Excellent. The survey closed message, once a survey has closed, you can have it close automatically. You have control over what message is displayed to the patron when a survey is taken offline. You can limit to a single entry per patron, and you can also here put date range limitations on it so that it does roll on and off automatically and show the survey closed message depending on that date range that you put in. In terms of the presentation of the survey, the form title shows up at the top of the survey. The form template is going to provide sort of the background and the entire frame for the survey itself and all the styling around it. You have 100% access and control to the form template. I'll show you what one of the template looks like here in a minute when we preview this, but it's very, very flexible. You can make it look as if it's absolutely 100% part of your website or as different from your website as you'd like. It's just up to you. Starting point, do you want the patron to start on page 1 or do you want to show an introduction page before they start the survey? You can do something along those lines. When the survey is completed, what do you want to show the patron? Or do you want to take them to a web page on your site where that content lives? So you can either enter the message here and customize what message you show the patron, or you can send them to a page on an external site once they've completed the survey. Confirmation email and notification email, those are the two features that I was talking about earlier that use the tokens that you set up on the questions, where you can send a confirmation email to the person who completed the survey with their responses listed out in that email. You can also send a notification email to somebody on your staff letting them know that the survey was completed and what the responses were that were included in that survey. So some good options there for just keeping track of what's going on with the survey, especially if you intend to respond to these patrons and you're not just collecting the information to do some sort of data analysis on or something like that. Any questions about the setup of the surveys that you've seen so far?
Nope.
Okay, great. So there's one other type of thing that you can create, and that's an event registration form. The only thing that's different about the event registration forms is that you start with the event path here. You build them exactly the same way as you build the surveys. They just get categorized as a little bit of a different type of form because we use them for that special activity registration. So there's nothing different in terms of how you build them. I'm not going to go through that process just because it's exactly the same as what we just saw. But you have the option to have as many different questions as you want around the RSVP and so on. The only difference in terms of how you set up the questions is that in order to link them up to a special activity, we need to have a little bit of a convention to what you have your question tokens be, because we need to know which questions we pay attention to for the quantity, how many people are coming, the yes-no question, are you coming or are you not, and so on. And we don't want to force you to ask that question a specific way. We want you to have the flexibility to ask that question in the RSVP form however you'd like. So what we do is we just ask that you put in a convention here in the token. So for like the are you coming question, the token needs to be SA status. And that's because that links to the status column in the Tessitura database in the special activities table. Okay, so that's the yes-no question. We also have two other possible options, SA num attendees. That links to the num attendees column in that same table in the Tessitura database. And of course the SA notes token, which would link up to the notes field, because we track all three of those items back to the special activity registration in Tessitura on the special activities radio button in the history tab when somebody responds to a special activity to which they have been invited. So that's the only thing to note with the special activity and event registration is that you have to have these questions have a particular token so that we know where to map them. You're basically mapping this question to a particular thing in Tessitura so we know where to deposit that data. Okay? All right, so in terms of setting up surveys and kind of the Mail to dashboard portion of setting them up, that's the long and the short of it. There's reporting that goes along with those surveys. If we go to view our completed surveys here, you'll see what's going on with that. So we can take a look at a basic report. You can see individual responses. You can see some basic charting around the responses that break them down into pie charts. Rankers show you the percentage for each type of choice and so on. You can view the individual responses through here. You can filter responses and so on. So it gives you a good way to kind of sort through those responses when they come back into your Mail to dashboard. One other thing to note with the surveys as a part of this release is that you have the ability to make your surveys personally identifiable. Previously to this release, we could not do that. All of our surveys were anonymous. which of course in the context of Tessitura makes no sense. You have to know who somebody is in order for this data to be meaningful in the context of Tessitura. So what we have is when you create your email to send out the invitation to the survey, you're going to go ahead and say something like, take our survey now, or register for the event now. And you can take and I'm going to actually use this little clipboard here to put in a survey token. And let's say it's my post-show survey 2. I insert that. It gives me a little token here. I can now copy that or cut it. And I'm going to use that as the link here. Link URL becomes the token. I'm going to do the same thing for an event now. I've got, I don't know if I have an event registration form. Yeah, RSVP for the pre-show event. I'll insert that. Cut that. You guys get the idea. So now, when this campaign deploys, the link that is used on this text is going to be personally identifiable to the person that received the campaign. So it's very similar to that thing with, again, if you used SurveyMonkey in the past, when people receive a survey link from SurveyMonkey, it's very clear. It says this link is just for you. This has personally identifiable information in it, however you want to phrase that, but it's like, hey, don't forward this to your friends to take the survey because this link is just for you, to make it personally identifiable. So we do have that option now. Use this little clipboard to find that token and insert it in, and that makes the results that you get back able to be tied back to a particular email address. We only track responses that are personally identifiable back into Tessitura because, again, if a response if it can't be associated with an individual, there's not much value for it back on the Tessitura side. And there's not really a place to put it. And you can't even really report much around it on the Tessitura side if it's not linked up to a constituent. So we don't right now bring those back into Tessitura. There may be a point in the future, if we can find a compelling use case to do so, where we make a decision to start bringing responses back into Tessitura that are anonymous. But at this time, we do not bring the anonymous responses back into Tessitura. Okay? So once you've created your invitation and you send out your survey, when you activate the survey is where the rubber really meets the road in terms of Tessitura. So all the way up until basically activation, there's really been very little that's happened in Tessitura. You create the survey. Upon survey creation, Mail2 does send a little message back into Tessitura that says, oh, hey, Tessitura, a new survey has been created. Go ahead and put a little bit of information into the database that says there's been a new survey that's been initialized. But that's really all it does. Once you activate the survey, Mail2 gives Tessitura the full flight of information about it. It gives it all the information about the survey itself, all of the questions and the possible responses that can be made to each one of those questions, and all of that gets tracked back into a custom table structure in Tessitura. So we have 5 tables that make up that, and I'm just going to show you what those are here. We'll get a little bit technical here for a minute. All right. So we've got LTR-M2 surveys that keeps track of all of these surveys themselves. And you can see all the surveys that I've created here and all of my testing. We've got LTR-M2 survey question choices, LTR-M2 survey questions, survey respondents, and then survey responses to track all the responses back into Tessitura. All of this information gets backfilled after you activate the survey and you start collecting responses from the patron. Okay? So once you start receiving responses, those are processed real-time back into Tessitura, into our custom table structure here. You have 100% access to this table structure. So as we get responses back into Tessitura, you'll be able to see all of those responses here. They get tracked back to an individual respondent, or a contact ID, as we call it. And all that stuff is tracked back over in the LTM2 survey respondents table. So all the data is stored in a relational format in Tessitura so that after you send the survey out, and you want to do any kind of like more advanced reporting on this kind of thing later on, you have all the access you need to the data to do what you need to do in Tessitura. That could be anything from translating a response from a particular response on a specific question into an interest or attribute on constituent records. It could be taking and exposing some of this information to extractions or list managers, so you can filter through contacts based on their response to a survey. Really, there's no limit to what you can do with this, and that was the idea, is that Mail2 really needs to function more as a data transport in this case. People respond to the surveys. We just wanted to put that information into Tessitura in a structure that made sense and was accessible from a database perspective in a relational way, so that you could do whatever you needed to do with this data. Okay? So as soon as you activate the survey, we populate all that information into the survey questions, survey question choices, and surveys tables. Once responses start rolling in, we start populating respondents in the respondent table and their individual responses in the survey responses table, and you're able to access all of that on an ongoing basis. Any questions about that so far?
I'm John. It's Paula here from Stratford. I mean, John. Chris. With respect to that, you were showing us, now you have it up on the screen, the custom survey screen.
Yes.
Is there any security that can be offered on that? So, for example, we'd maybe want management to be able to see survey responses, but we don't necessarily need our call center reps to be able to see that.
Yeah, so that would definitely be possible, and you would do it at the radio button level with the database object for the custom screen. You would have the option to just simply not show this custom screen for their login user group. So it would be user grouped based on kind of the Tessitura functionality for the custom radio buttons.
And another question, we currently have a whole survey set up already in a custom screen in Tessitura where we're collecting information. Is there any way to integrate that in any way with, because we have lots of existing data.
Mm-hmm.
So is there
Sure.
any way to get that sort of crossed over a little bit?
Where do you
Starting
store
fresh.
that data right now, Paula?
We have on the custom tab, we have just a survey radio button, and there are a series of about 40 questions that are also randomized. So we use it in the call center specifically. So when people call in, all the questions are ranked, and so the staff are instructed to ask the top three, whatever is available, sort of the top three, and then obviously if the questions have been answered, then that's fine. But it refreshes every time the custom screen is refreshed.
Okay.
So the stuff is all sitting there, and it's in a table.
So depending on how that data is stored right now, I mean, we could migrate some of that into our data structure just so it was all in one place. Or if you wanted to, I mean, what I'm showing you here is kind of an example of a survey that's been set up as a custom screen, because you can do that with Mail2, where you create the form in Mail2, and then you set up that survey as a custom screen in Tessitura. And then so you actually could supplant your current form with one of the Mail2 survey forms, and as people respond, it kind of does what you're asking. I mean, you could randomize the order of the questions, like what you're talking about, so it just serves up a different top three each time they come here.
And but I can't rank them though. Can I rank them?
Can you
change the ranking of any of these questions based on some things we need? Like for example, we're doing a kids show next year.
Right.
So this year we ranked the sort of do purchase tickets to children's productions higher in the ranking.
Okay. Yeah, that would not be possible with this. But as far as like taking that data and populating it into our custom data structure, I mean, I think you certainly would be able to do that. It might take a little bit of retooling, how you process the submission of that report on the back end, just so that it linked into our tables. But Brian, I could work with Brian to like show him around the table structure.
Okay.
Pretty simple. But if you guys wanted to make sure that you kind of stored it all in one place, then we could probably route that and make it work that way. I couldn't say 100% until I looked at your current data structure with him, but I don't see any reason why you shouldn't be able to.
Okay.
But I just want to look at it with him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Any other questions about the? Well, I suppose we should look at the Mail2 survey custom screen here. So this is where you can look up responses within Tessitura.
Sorry, I have one quick question about the data table. In the data table, so if I have multiple surveys going at the same time, I can search by those surveys, right? Like they're never ever overwritten, they're just stored there forever?
That's correct. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. So looking at the survey custom screen, if you look up responses for an address, this drop-down, of course, populates with the addresses from the constituent record. So you can select which address you want to select that they responded from. It brings up a list here of all the surveys that have been deployed to them and the events that have been deployed to the patron to that address. You can expand that and see all the responses here to that survey. And same with events. If you have an ongoing survey that somebody could respond to multiple times, then dropping that down shows you the individual response sets. So in this case, this is one that I used significantly for testing. And so you'll see I responded a lot of times to this kind of back to back to back. And then I can see the individual results by expanding that particular response. But this is meant to just be sort of a hub within the constituent record where you can go and explore what somebody's responses have been to particular surveys that they've taken over the past, just to keep it all kind of together on the constituent record. So in the Mail to dashboard, you'll see that we've got a new Surveys and Events tab up here in the upper right as well that shows up once you have turned on surveys for your dashboard. And we have a Manage Surveys and a Manage Events area. Managing surveys, this gives you a view of all of the currently active or completed surveys that you have as an organization. Only active or completed surveys can be synced to Tessitura. If I click on this sync button here, it asks me if I want to sync only completed responses or if I want incomplete responses to be included in my transmission as well. By default, only complete responses are transmitted to Tessitura automatically. If you want to backfill the incomplete responses after the fact, then once the survey is closed, you just pop in here, click on sync, make sure you don't check that box and click sync now. That goes ahead and synchronizes all this stuff back into Tessitura and makes sure that every response that's been captured for that survey makes its way into the Tessitura database. So it just does this real time as you wait for it to complete. It's just breezing through everything associated with that survey and popping it back into Tessitura. And then once it's complete, it resolves and gives you a success message.
So how often do you have to sync your event or survey?
You don't ever have to if you don't want to. If you want, the only time you would really need to sync a survey is if one of a couple of things happens. Number one, you have a Tessitura outage in the middle of your survey when it's happening. So your API goes down and every attempt that we make to transmit complete responses back to Tessitura fails. Okay, so you have an outage, you got to go back and sync your survey. You can always backfill it from the Mail to dashboard. The second scenario where you would need to do sync surveys is if you wanted every type of response to be backfilled into Tessitura. So you wanted both complete and incomplete responses tracked in Tessitura. So even people who didn't finish the survey, they abandoned it halfway through, you want whatever responses they did give you to make their way back into Tessitura. Then once the survey was complete, you just have to pop in here and click sync and have it do its business. But those are the only two scenarios where you'd actually have to sync the survey, purposefully sync the survey. Otherwise, it happens on its own for completed responses throughout the survey collection period.
And is there some kind of message that happens if in that first case where there's an interruption and a failure? Like, do we get a notification? Because how would we know then?
Yeah, sure. There would be because of the webhook failure. So currently, whenever a webhook can't be processed for your organization, typically there's an email that gets sent to the admin on your Mail2 account that says, hey, we tried to process a webhook, but it fell apart for some reason and was not able to be processed. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Chris, another question. So, for example, say we move over. One of the questions we ask is sort of what your birth date is.
Yes.
So, and then we will run lists based on that. So we might say, give me everybody who blah blah blah. has seen the show who was born in 1970 for whatever reason. So can I grab all of the data that may have been collected in that survey in List Builder?
You would be able to. The way that I would recommend doing that, though, just so that it was done in a way that was more, like more or less put the data into a more tessitura-ish kind of mechanism, would be to have Brian write like a really easy nightly job that basically took survey responses, and if you know what the question ID is, that's the when is your birthday question ID, it just goes through all the survey responses that have come in the last whatever time period since the job ran last. It scoops up all those birthdays and it puts them into an interest or an attribute for somebody, and that way it's it's in a data structure in Tessitura that you can use more broadly across the system. Otherwise, you would be able to write custom like custom list manager elements that referenced the survey data in there. There's a couple of different ways you could do that, but ultimately the answer to your question is yes. There's probably 2 or 3 ways you could do it. So it's just up to you which route gets you the best result for what you're using it for. So.
Okay.
So the other thing that I want to show you is about the managing events. So when you create an event RSVP form, you're going to go into your Manage Events dialog here, and you need to tell it which special activity the form is linked up to, right? Because in Tessitura, special activities they're kind of their own thing. They're a combination of an activity type and a date. And so we need to let Mail2 know that a particular form is responsible for tracking RSVPs back to that particular activity type and that particular date. So what you do is you just drop into your Manage Events dialog here. We're going to click on Link for one of these here that have not been linked yet. Comes up with a list of my special activity types from Tessitura. I'm going to call this an open dress rehearsal, and I'm going to select the open dress rehearsal that's maybe on August 30th. Click Link Event, and now you'll see that it's linked up. So when this RSVP form becomes active and people respond to it, if they have been invited in Tessitura to the open dress rehearsal on August 30th, then it will update their invitation on their history tab to show that they're attending, that they have one attendee, and whatever special notes they put into that form in the Mail2 survey. If somebody has not been invited, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, if somebody hasn't been invited to an activity, so let's say that I receive this and I get all excited about it and send it out to 20 friends and they try to RSVP, there would be nothing to update in Tessitura because they have not been invited to the activity. That's where the notification emails that I was talking about earlier when somebody completes a survey come in really handy. Development folks really like to be up to speed and very informed about who's RSVPing to their activities and when. So I would say coupling that notification email so that every time somebody fills out the notification form, it emails the development person so that they can just kind of keep a running total and seeing who's responding, who's coming back. That way, if somebody does respond that hasn't been invited, they can take the appropriate steps at that point, whether that's replying back to them and saying, like, hey, we don't have an invitation on file for you. This is an invitation-only type of event, whatever the case is. Or, hey, glad you're interested. We're happy to have you join. Please give us $500, and you're welcome to attend. So whatever the conversation is. So.
Now, when you're setting up, when you're linking it, can you only link it to the Special Activities tab or radio button, or can I do it anywhere in Tessitura?
This integrates specifically with Special Activities. So we don't, where else, let me ask, I guess, open up the question a little bit. Where else would you want to link off to? Like what other types of things?
One button over.
Yeah, we do our events in Activities and Events, the radio buttons. We do both of them.
Yeah, and this is elevated events, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So elevated events is coming eventually. The problem with elevated events today is that structure within Tessitura is not accessible via the API. In fact, sort of interactions with elevated events, they're not really. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. They're pretty inaccessible from external systems. I mean, the way they work is so unique that it was a much more sophisticated kind of interaction that we would have had to take on with Tessitura, and we sort of decided we were going to walk before we ran with this feature. we've talked to Tessitura about it. I've talked to Chuck about it. They are going to be revamping a lot of how they work with elevated events in version 12.5 and version 14. So as those things come along, you're going to see this integration get deeper as the API has increased sort of interaction with Tessitura along those lines. So
there's no immediate plan to get it to update elevated events. It's kind of we're waiting for some Tessitura upgrades.
Yeah, exactly. And part of the thing, too, with elevated events is that the user has to log in a lot of cases for the elevated event RSVP stuff to really be meaningful. It's not as simple as activities where, I mean, it's just basically a yes, no, how many, and give me some notes. A lot of times with elevated events, there's some payment involved for the event because it's perhaps a gala type of event or something like that. And that's something that obviously, like, we don't want to get in the middle of accepting payment with your organization, you know. So there's kind of a fine line that we're trying to, I don't know, we're just trying to assess what the best approach is there. If you guys see an opportunity with elevated events that you'd like to explore with us, I'd love to talk to you more about that to see if there's a way that we can develop an integration with them that works for you guys for those sort of easier types of elevated events. So.
Okay. In the special activities tab, when you're calculating the people coming, like if they're coming and how many people are coming, can you take guest names as well? Is it just in the notes field your guest names would populate?
Exactly, yeah. If they wanted to put in, you would put on the notes field in the survey, you would put something that would indicated, you know, please tell us the names of the guests that are attending with you below, and they would put that into the notes field, and we would deposit it.
Got it.
Yep. And that's it. Any other questions about what you've seen today?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay, excellent. Arena stage folks, anything else from your side today?
I think we're good.
Okay. Well, thank you guys for taking some time to look at this. Let us know if you're interested in getting pricing or adding this onto your dashboard. This is a feature that is an additional cost for Mail2. It's one of the couple of features that we have that do cost a little bit extra to do. But let us know, and we're happy to get you some pricing on that. So.
And Chris, regarding that, it's surveys and events are a single feature, right?
That's correct. Yeah, everything that you've seen today is part of a single feature. Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
Great.
Well, thank you so much. We'll be in touch.
All right, great. Thank you.
All right.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.